today I'll be checking out Star Wars Battle for Endor from West End Games in 1989. It's a Star Wars adventure board game. It's a solitaire game. And as always, subscriptions are appreciated if you like the content I'm putting together here. Of course, from the original trilogy, this is from Return of the Jedi. And you're the Rebel Forces and Ewoks battling the Imperial Forces on Endor. It's a box shelf size game. Cover art's not too exciting, but I guess it captures a little bit of what's going on in Endor. Got some Ewoks with a catapult. Got some walkers there and Ewoks on kind of gliders, I guess. Here's the back. Shows you a little scene from Return of the Jedi. And it gives you a little bit of theme. The situation seems hopeless. Hundreds of Imperial troops surround the Rebel strike team. Stormtroopers, speeder bikes, and ST walkers. The mission has failed. With the energy field still protecting the new Death Star, the Rebel fleet faces imminent destruction. The last hope of the Alliance lies with a handful of captured heroes and unorganized army of natives, Ewoks, whose weaponry is no match for Imperial firepower. Can you, as the Rebel leader, reverse the fortunes of war? An innovative solitaire system controls the Imperial forces. Your enemy has great firepower and the ability to shift tactics. All you have is your skill, your courage, and the primitive technology of a clever and resourceful ally. May the Force be with you. Then for components, the rules, the map, which I'll talk about. Then you have this nice tray, which it works well. There's cards. There's action cards and event cards. They have good art on them. They have nice dice. So there's six of these dice that they call fire dice, and they have either blank, Darth Vader to indicate the Imperials, or a lightsaber to indicate the Rebels, and that's used during play. So there's 6 of those custom dice. There's 2, regular D6s that are for, placement randomization. And then there's 2 trays, one meant for the Imperial Forces, and then one meant for the Rebels. The cards themselves come on these stands, sort of pre-miniature stuff, but they work nice. They're functional. I'm glad it's nice to have a tray for them. Similarly for the Imperial, they have these counters that stand. So as far as the counters, each of these go on a stand, except there's a couple. There's a wounded marker, which is obviously a place set to indicate damage. And then there's a marker to move to show the Imperial tactics being used, and these are put on the map. So then these are the different characters used in the game. Of course, there's the heroes, here being Leia, and then in the back. These are Rebel troopers. These are Ewoks. These are Ewok leaders. Ewok catapults. Then, of course, a stormtrooper, Imperial security trooper, Imperial ST, and then a speeder bike. These numbers are just to indicate, the number of the unit, but the actual statistics are on the board for their firepower. So here's the map. I'm not super thrilled with the graphics because, for instance, the map itself, I think I'm happy with the map, but the graphics over here, I think it's very simplistic, and they could have done a lot more. It looks it just looks like there wasn't a lot of effort into making this kind of information out here. You put your action and event cards here, and when you use them, you flip them over. It's pretty straightforward. So it's the Rebel versus the Imperial forces. The Imperial tactics can and will change during the game based on the situation. A, B, C, D are the 4 different types of Imperial tactics that says where they're focusing their efforts, that sort of thing. So that's an interesting way to go about that. So here's the fire strength, fire armor strength chart, which you use for combat, which I'll show for all the different unit types, heroes, STs, stormtroopers, etc. So it shows the fire strength and also the armor strength, so the attack and defense basically. And then over here, these are the hero boxes, self-explanatory, but so it says what happens when they get different hits on them. And breach means trying to get into the Imperial site here. So that's trying to breach that wall. That's what breach is referring to. And the Ewok leaders. And then when they're captured, you basically put the counter in the box and take them off the board. And then there's the Imperial bunker box, which this is the Imperial bunker. And this shows your success in basically opening the door to get into the bunker. and shows the different types of terrain, forest, woods, hills, and depending on the terrain, that affects various movement and combat, which we'll talk about in the game. And then so this is to randomize. You want a 6 for obviously a d6, and then location around that from a d6. So you have your individual hexes, and then you have what they call macro hexes, reinforcement zones. That's the map. 12-page rulebook, credits, the objective. The rebel players basically have to destroy the Imperial bunker before 5 rebel cruisers are destroyed. Terrain doesn't affect movement, other than there's some terrains where things can't go, so it does affect it that way, but it doesn't, slow movement. Either you can either go in it or you can't. So other than restricting movement, the main effect is it affects attacks. And there's some chance of Imperial reinforcements coming in. Then there's action cards and event cards. Each turn you draw an action card. The game's a little bit unique in that every turn not everything moves or fires, but basically the action cards tell you what movements of the rebel or Imperial can move or fire, and then what they do. And there's also some special actions as well. One special action is to draw an event card. So when you draw an event card, this is where you might find that a rebel cruiser has been destroyed, or there's some special events like Chewbacca takes over at ATST, or you might find out that Imperial reinforcements are coming, which isn't a good thing. The turn sequence then is draw an action card, do what the action card says as far as which items move or fire. Maybe you have to draw an event card, you do that, and then you repeat. And then when you get to the bottom of the action cards, you shuffle them, return them. Generally, you're given 5 movement points, and each hex costs 1 movement point to enter. There's some exceptions. There's not, like I said, there's not some that move slower or faster. It's either you can move into it or you can't. For instance, clear, all units may enter clear, woods. Speeder bikes can't enter woods, but everything else can. Hills, everything except ATSTs may enter the hills. All units may enter the bunker. And the one exception is it costs 2 MPs to enter the bunker complex box. So in firing then, there's fire and there's armor. So basically, fire tells you how many of the fire dice you can use. So if your fire is 3, you would use 3. So for instance, if the Imperial is fighting at the Rebel, and their armor is only 1, if you roll 3 dice and get 1 hit, basically Darth Vader, that unit is either wounded or destroyed. General units are only destroyed with 1 hit, but heroes generally need 2 hits to be destroyed. There's also options of combining fire, so basically if a couple of units each are able to have 2 fire dice, if you combine them you can get more than that. And Ewok leaders are the ones that can facilitate that. The cards tell you which Imperial units are firing, what they're firing at. The different heroes have different abilities to breach. Action cards, they tell you when you can do breach attempts. The event cards talk about if you're regrouping, reinforcement, rebel regroupings. Rebel cruisers destroyed. When you get 5 of those, then you lose. And the Imperials can chip tactics, and it goes from A, B, C to D. Special events like traps. Chewbacca can take over an ATST. The rebels want to get to the Imperial bunker, breach or open the doors, and then destroy the Imperial bunker. And so you breach it by each of the heroes has different breach capability, and that's the number of dice, etc. This shows what you have to do for that. Destroy the bunkers. Destroy it, you have to be inside the bunker, and then if a hero's there when there aren't any Imperial Forces, then you've destroyed the bunker and win the game. If 5 rebel cruisers are destroyed before you can destroy the bunker, then you lose. But conversely, if you destroy the bunker before that happens, you as the rebel win. So I've set it up here. So the first rebel units go around the bunker box, which is right here actually, under this unit. First you set up 4 rebel trooper units, which are these, And then you also set up 3 of the heroes, Chewbacca, Leia, and Solo in there. So between 7 of those, you cover that initial Rebel setup area right there. And then you start setting up the Imperial Forces. 2 of the Imperial security units go in the bunker box, so they're inside the bunker. And then you use randomization to do the others. So you put... So around this first macro hex, there's these other ones. You see the numbers. There's like the second tier out of macro hexes is the Imperial setup area, where the interior one is the Rebel setup. So set up the Rebels, then you set up the Imperial in the Imperial setup area here, and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 indicating the macro hexes. You set up 2 of them in there, and for each of these different units, you basically use a dice and you roll. So depending on the roll, you'll set up your AT-AT walkers in the different areas. One is here, for instance. I had rolled at 5 before. So you do go in the 5 macro hex. And then according to the rolls, you set them up in the hex of terrain you can be in, the most distant from the Rebels. AT-ATs can't be on hills. It's not at a hill there, so you set up there. And similarly for the other AT-AT, you roll 6-sided dice and put it furthest away in that macro hex. Speeder bikes, and then in this area, then you set up 4 speeder bikes. You're using the same approach, roll 6-sided dice, put it as far as away you can from the Rebels, but speeder bikes can't be in wood. So, for instance, a speeder bike is right here, and it can't be in the woods, so it has to be either in the hill or in the clear area. So you do that for 4 of them. You set up 8 stormtroopers using a similar approach, using 6-sided dice, as far as we can. For instance, here's a stormtrooper. Set up 8 of those. You put 4 security troops in there, and that would be these ones. So similar approach as before. That's the setup for the Imperial units. And if you want a more challenging game, it gives you the option of adding a couple more ATSTs to your troopers, to your Imperials. Or you can also, instead of waiting for the 5th cruiser, you can wait, just have the Imperials when the 4th cruiser is destroyed. So that's ways of making it more difficult. So after you set up the Imperials, then you set up the Ewoks. And then the Ewoks, so the area, the next set of macro hexes around the Imperial hexes, is here. And so in this next tier out of macro hexes, you set up basically the Ewok army. The units in the Ewok setup area then are the macro hex beyond the Imperial setup area. And in there you set up 3 Ewok leaders, which are, this is 1. You set up 15 Ewoks, and these are Ewoks. And then you set up C-3PO and R2-D2, which here they are. So you set all those up in this next tier out. And then after that, you set up the 3 Ewok catapult units in the Deepwood setup area, which is everything beyond the Ewok setup area that you did previously. So I set 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. So you have 3 of those. So after you do that setup, there's still some Imperial Forces remaining in the tray. Some are for advanced, more difficult play if you want other rules, but others are reinforcements that may come in later in play. And we'll play through it. So I'm a bit into the game here now, so I thought I'd kind of take a tally of where things are at and kind of show how it's going. These are the units that have been taken off the board. Maybe between a third and a half of the units have been taken off the board. So that's been happening. And I've totally went through the action deck once. Now I'm on, getting close to all the way through it again. So a summary of what's happened thus far is that it's been interesting. So movement of different units, firing of different units. So it turns out one interesting thing that happened was there was the Imperial Forces got an event card that said they could add reinforcement. So I got 2 ATST walkers, 1 is still surviving. But then on a subsequent turn, the heroes, Chewbacca was in there at that time, were able to group their fire, and individually they have a fire of 1, so they were able to group it to a fire of 3, and then for ranged attacks, how it works is you deduct a fire of 1 for each macro hex it is out, generally. It's basically 3 minus 1, 2, and then they rolled rolled 2 dice and they got 2, lightsabers. And since the armor of a ATST is 2, it needed 2 hits to be destroyed, and so they grouped their fire and they destroyed that. So it's like a dramatic thing that you could see happening in a movie, for instance. The Imperial tactics they've moved up since then, but the initial tactics run Tactic A, which is hunt Ewoks, and that's what happened. That's saying that the Imperial Forces should prioritize getting the Ewoks, basically moving and firing. You see a lot of stormtroopers, speed bikes are out here, and they went out there because the Ewoks were out there. You might notice there aren't many Ewoks left because they pretty much decimated the Ewoks, unfortunately. The heroes, including C-3PO or D2, take 2 hits. The stormtrooper with a fire dice of 3 was in the same macro hex, and they got an action card that said basically stormtroops can fire, and they fired at R2-D2 C-3PO and got 2 hits. They were removed from the game and counted as being captured, and so they're put off here. They're off the game now. And another thing that happened was so the Ewok leaders take 2 hits to get damaged. One took 1 hit, so it was marked as wounded here. Han Solo is on the Imperial bunker trying to breach it, and also Leia's there. Leia took a hit and therefore is wounded. And then other units have been removed, like for instance, Annette Walker took out a catapult. Catapult took out speed bikes. So a lot of it's been a lot going on. So now we'll do a couple, demonstration turns just so you get a sense of it. I want to point out too that Leia and Han Solo had been able to, they were successful in one breach of the blast door. To breach the blast door, you have to have a unit within, the Imperial bunker, which Han Solo is. And then you roll the number of dice equal to the breach ability. So for Han, he can roll 2 dice. If you roll 1 or more sabers, you can open the door some, and they were able to open the door some, not all the way, but some. But if you were to roll instead of a saber, a Darth Vader symbol, you would move it, the other way, so it would close more. So they were able to breach it somewhat. So we'll do the next turn and take an action card and see what this is. The next action then would be Security Troops move. That's an action card, Security Troops move, and I can move 5 movement points. So the Security Troops then they would be these. These indicators are Security Troops. They're the only ones remaining. And I'll just keep them where they're at because they're by the heroes now, by the Imperial bunker box, and I want them there for the next turn when I can draw a turn where they fire, because I want them to be in the same macro hex as the heroes so they have the best chance of being successful. So that was uneventful, but that was that turn. And then I'll do the next turn. I take another action, and this one is draw event. So I will draw an event. This is the worst one you can get. A cruiser has been destroyed, and once you get 5 of these, the Empire has won. So I'll set that over, here to keep track of what's going on there. So that's 1. So that's the end of that action. The next action, heroes may move, fire, or breach. So this is a good one for our heroes. It shows they can move 5 movement points, which is standard. They have fire strength of 1. They may combine fire, and they may roll breach dice. So the one that can roll a breach dice is Han Solo, because, as I said, he's on the Imperial bunker box. He is allowed 2 dice, so we'll see what happens. So he's successful, and this is pretty eventful because he is able to open the door all the way. So now that the door is open, in subsequent turns where they say different items can move with an Imperial or Rebel, they can go into the bunker and try to get that space. And if a hero is in that space with no other enemy units, when the appropriate event card comes up that says that indicates that there's success if they're in the bunker at that time. Then that indicates victory in that condition. They'll be victorious. Now that they open the bunker, they want to clear the enemies out and have a hero there. So that was successful for Han. And then Leia will attack. She gets 1 dice, and he takes 1 to hit. She failed because she didn't get a lightsaber. Chewbacca is the other hero, and he's here, and he's in the same macro hex as this stormtrooper, so he'll attack, and he's not successful either. And C-3PO, R2, D2 are not available. That's that turn. So it shows a little bit how combat moves there. Then I'll do one more just to see what happens here. And then this card is Rebel Trooper's move. So this is a Rebel Trooper. He can go in. So he can go 1, 2. He's in the bunker box. Oh, here, this guy can go in too. So he can go in the bunker box. So now you have 2 Rebel Troopers in the bunker box. One other thing to mention, since the bunker is open now, it has been breached. When you get a breach of the bunker, the Imperial Forces change their tactics. These are the tactics. They had been on the tactic of the hunt rebels, which is focusing on troopers. This is the order in which they would attack, basically, if they're in proximity. But now, since the bunker's been breached, the tactic going forward now will be breach. The Imperial Forces are will now be moving towards the bunker and engaging Rebel troopers, Ewoks heroes, and Ewok leaders there. So it's a summary of the action. So that's Star Wars Battle for Endor from West End Games. I found it to be very enjoyable. It's designed completely to be a solitaire game. The map is very good. I like the map a lot. I just didn't like the periphery art, but once you get into the play, you don't really care about that. It's just a place to put stuff. I like the whole combat system where it tells you the number of dice and the number of successes you need on like 1 die roll, and then these awesome custom dice. And then the unit does a job. It's nice art. It works out really well. And then also you have your action event card, and it all kind of feeds into the urgency and the theme and uncertainty of the game, and it gives you, a sense of accomplishment when you've achieved it. So I like the combat. I like how they do the sequence of movement. I like how they change tactics at different times, so that controls in a logical way what the forces do, but it's controlled, but it's also randomized, and that's a really good way of doing that system. I find I really enjoy it. I'll give it an 8. And Battle for Endor from West End Games.